The first big challenge is the macroeconomic and geopolitical volatility. What that comes with is uncertainties and more normally increases in inflation and interest, brings recession risks. It also brings a lot of uncertainty in terms of planning. And it also has a real impact of increasing the cost base to a point where sometimes the cost base increase is much higher than the price increase that you can take and pass on to your consumers, which obviously impacts the profit delivery. Very close to that issue is forecasting and financial planning, the complexity that comes with those geopolitical volatility risks. It's very difficult to forecast and plan forward when there's a lot of volatility in the macroeconomic environment, because most often your consumers get most impacted and you can't quite tell how they will react. So that's another big issue. I think third, and very close to that, I alluded to it first, is the dilemma CFOs tend to have around cost optimization versus investing for growth. There's always a fine balance between how much you cut non-critical spend versus how much you spend to drive growth in the business. And it doesn't get any easier with the volatility we face. But that's something that we have to deal with as CFOs and sometimes take tough decisions to drive the business forward. Lastly, I would think regulatory compliance and ESG. I think in this world we live in now, there's a lot more pressure from regulators, especially in an industry like ours, where there's a lot more rules and regulations that you've got to follow. And that's even more pronounced in listed entities. So that's a huge risk because non-compliance comes with significant risk in terms of penalties and everything that could impact your profit and cash flow forecasting. And last but not least, which everyone deals with, talent retention. I think last time we spoke, we agreed that finance, especially finance professionals, are extremely stretched, extremely under pressure. And people tend to, when they're under pressure, decide to call it quits. Happens with CFOs, happens with our teams. And it's how you motivate people and how you retain people and keep them interested in what they're doing. Those are really the 5 things I could think about. Yeah. I would talk 4 broad areas. Firstly, shaping the corporate strategy. I think most people think of this corporate strategy thing and wonder what it is, but CFOs shape it by assessing investments, acquisition opportunities, new brand launch opportunities, lots of scenario analysis to determine whether this is the best thing for the business, whether it has a sustainable path to growth, what it leads to into the future, taking into account global and consumer trends. So that's a really key critical part that the CFO plays, because ultimately all the functional plans have to come together into one. And that's where the CFO's role comes, is to put all that together into a very simple and cohesive plan that the business can follow. And I think closely linked to that, connected planning and decision enablement. I think people underestimate the implications of not having integrated plans across functions in the business, operations, sales, supply chain, HR, and that's quite critical. Fortunately or unfortunately, the CFO has the pleasure of bringing all those together, enhancing insights coming out of all these functions and bringing them into a very simple view that you can share with the organization, with the shareholders, with all the stakeholders. Third one, very related, driving transformation. So be it digital transformation, operational transformation, changing things into simpler business models, changing your financing model to reduce your financing costs. All that kind of transformation, the CFO leads, whether we like it or not. Ultimately, what's the role of that is to demonstrate that we can deliver measurable business value. Another very important one, and I think the last quite big piece, is strategic risk management. So in everything we do, I think there's always going to be risks, especially in high growth opportunities. There's always going to be risks. The CFO's role is to identify those strategic risks and manage them through very clear mitigation plans. So when I talk risks, what do I mean? Macro risks. So geopolitical volatility, how do you manage those? Micro risks, things like regulatory, technology, technology is moving so fast. How much do you invest knowing that in 2-3 years, you'll have to reinvest? And that kind of thing. So the CFO's role around strategic risk management is also quite critical. And then lastly, linked to part of the biggest challenges from a CFO perspective, talent, leadership, and culture. So very important that while we are driving for performance, we shape high-performing finance culture, a high-performing finance culture. Guys who are equipped with ability to analyze, look forward, forecast, and promote continued learning. So that's, in a nutshell, what I would say the strategic role of the CFO is. Yeah.